And most of us are working with a personality that was created for us, but not by us. To be able to sort of circumvent that and actually get to know who you really are is actually what our purpose in life is. Otherwise, you're just living a narrative that somebody else has imbued into you. People think that the pain is your best teacher. My grandkids, if I wanted to teach them something's hot, I'd get an iron and stick it on their hand. That'd teach them, but that's called abuse. So why are we using abuse as a model for change in ourselves? No one's going to save you. You've got to save yourself. And how do you save yourself? Start. Just start with one thing. Stick good stuff in your ears. Start watching stuff on TV that actually nourishes your soul. You know, they say you are what you eat. Food is not just what you put in your mouth. Food is what you put in your ears and your head.
Hello, beautiful questers, and a warm welcome to the OneQuest podcast. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us on this journey of learning and self-discovery.
Our guests are not just mentors in wellness and self-improvement, they are adventurers at heart, sharing their unique paths and life lessons.
If you enjoy our show, please subscribe and share. Your support enables us to feature more amazing guests and deliver impactful conversations. Please note that some episodes may cover sensitive topics like abuse, mental health struggles, and personal challenges. Oh, we are so thrilled to welcome to the podcast Duncan MacMartin. Duncan is a truth seeker, intuitive healer, and a critical thinker whose life has been shaped by resilience, reinvention, and a deep commitment to authenticity. By growing up in a household that prioritized intellect over emotional connection, he spent years navigating the impacts of early conditioning while exploring spiritual, professional, and personal pathways to healing. With a background in fitness, massage therapy, and corporate leadership, he brings a rare blend of insight, intuition, and lived experience to his work. Today, Duncan challenges conventional approaches to mental health, advocates for vitality over survival, and supports others to live with sovereignty, connection, and purpose. Duncan.
My gosh, that was a interesting
Was that okay?
snapshot. Yeah, beautiful. I was so stoked to be here. And, Catherine, we know each other for over quite a few years. Steph, first time sort of connecting in, but I think this will be a beautiful conversation with you guys. And it's quite amazing to actually hear you. And we sort of talked off camera before, but to hear your bio read back to you, or an aspect of your bio, and how do you capture 50? How old am I? 54. How do you capture 54 years? That's been quite an eclectic life at times. Um, people, when we first meet each other, they say you size a person up within the first, 20 to 30 seconds sort of thing, or even a minute. But most of that is through the lenses of your own sort of perceptions of the world around you. And usually it's a safety lens that we've got on. So all of us are walking around with these multiple lenses that we interpret the world around us. Is this person a threat? Is probably the first one we go to. It's fascinating, to go, where do we go with a conversation sort of thing? I was just thinking, imagine if we'd sort of rocked up, you guys were sitting down at a cafe and having a feed, and I've rocked up there, it's so busy, there's a little bit of room on your table, and I go, hey, look, can I come and sit down with you? You guys, you look amazing. And then all of a sudden, there's a bit of a chat back and forth, and the next minute, 3 hours later, we're just going, oh, holy hell, that was great. And, and I think sometimes we've got to have a life like that, where we actually move beyond our. Oh, you'd be familiar with Trevor Hendy for sure, Steph. And he's on a podcast with Treaders called the Ballsy Podcast, and it was beautiful. I listened to it the other day, and he talks about identity as an ID entity. And so most of us are working with a personality that was created for us, but not by us. And to be able to sort of circumvent that and actually get to know who you really are is actually what really our purpose in life is. Because once you find that, then the magic really happens with life. Otherwise, you're just living a narrative that somebody else has imbued into you, and your experiences through that narratives. So, God, we went there. Not even a glass of red wine, but I am going to have a sip of my cup of tea if you'd like to ask a question.
Oh, Duncan, look, I just love our conversations. They're always like so rich and honest, and you just have that rare mix of like heart and depth, and you just have a way of cutting through like all the noise, and we just get to what's really real. And whether we're talking about vitality or spirituality or just even that quiet work of really becoming who we are, it's always fascinating to take the time to sort of dive into that with you and explore some of those really big themes that shape our lives. And I know, like, you often speak about living heart first and tuning into your inner compass. And I love that that's, such a passion for you of, really leading with truth and staying grounded. Like, how does that play out in your life? Like, what does it feel like these days to really live heart first, especially when, you're very much in the men's health space and mental health space at the moment? Um, and you're really sort of leading by example in that.
Yeah. Look, beautiful question. Let's sort of dive into a little bit of stuff with this. We'll have a look at what a heart is. Are you familiar with Carl Jung? Talks about the three births. All right. So Carl Jung was a psychologist who came up with some very profound insights. It was understudy from Freud. Thank God he sort of stepped away from Freud and came up with his own ideas, because I think Freud got stuck in a narrative or a loop from the stuff that I've sort of tapped into. But it talks about three births. The first birth is your physical birth. The second birth is the birth of your ego, or your personality or your identity. And the third birth is available for you. That's the birth of your consciousness. And, that's the conscious living. And we could call that the heart, living from the heart, living from soul, living from the spirit within, if you want to, whatever language you want to put on that. But there is actually, the reality is it's the real you. And so it's being able to see you behind the veil. And I sort of differ a little bit from Carl Jung. I think there's two, when you come to the second birth, there's a part A and a part B. And the part A is the birth is the ego. That's the conditioning that we actually have. As I was talking about, the personality that was created for you, but not by you. But then something will happen, and you'll start to crack through, and you'll start to ask questions why, and that leads to the birth of the spiritual ego, which is not a bad thing, unless you stay there. And it's actually the birth of the seeker, is trying to understand. Now, where does that actually come from? That knowing of that. And for me, what you see, I did a little bit of work with kids many years ago, with a mob called Answer, which is a new start for underachievers. And what I noticed with this sort of came out of, I was working in disabilities with teenagers at the time, and having some beautiful conversations with parents about the damage that they'd seen their child born fine, and then medical interventions occurred, and they actually had sustained some damage. And having these conversations with them, and I started looking at how they were actually moving, and I just had a bub of my own. My daughter had just been born, and you notice with a child, you've got this palmar reflex. If you get a little baby, put your finger in their hand, they grab onto it. They grasp onto it. You've got the gallant reflex, which is if you strike down their back, they get this wiggle going on. You play with the bottom of their feet. There's a Babinski reflex, and you see the foot go like this. It claws in. All these reflexes are designed to actually use the external environment to stimulate us to actually engage. But what it's engaging, and you'll appreciate this, Steph, from your, the movement side of things that you've been doing, is that what they do is they actually get you to coordinate and get these prime mover muscles working, and all these little muscles that stabilize joints, and they get us to engage in the world around us. And the hand, when a child's crawling, the distance we have for our hands is the same distance we read at. So we're now programming the brain, and we're getting left and right hemispheres connecting in. So there's all this stuff going on, but it's the primal reflexes that have been sitting in our body. Now, what we know is if you don't overcome those reflexes, they'll stay in your body, and you'll start to see fidgety kids. You'll start to see kids that actually can't pay attention. You'll see kids moving down the dyslexic space, cognitive, impairment, where the letters are moving off pages and stuff like that. The brains aren't working properly. And So what we need to do is we need to overcome these. But what was beautiful about it is that nobody gave them to us. They were actually instilled within us. So the same thing comes to the seeker side of things. When we look at the seeker, there's actually a part of us that is actually a knowing of something more. There's a knowing of something more. You know, you look at these people who've, you know, and I've been to that space where you fall to your knees and you just go, I can't do this anymore. Help me, God. You know, it might be a cry out. And those help me, God is actually like, there is a knowing that there's something more, that is something out there. And for a lot of us, we'll move into this seeker space. So we start to question the narratives that have created this identity. There's a Buddhist koan, and the Buddhist koan says, and a koan's like a bit of a riddle, for want of a better term, and it says, the face we had before our parents were born. So I'll say it again, the face we had before our parents were born.
It's fascinating.
And so that's your original face. And in actual fact, that's who you really are. And so the idea behind that is that your parents, through their upbringing and their conditioning and stuff like that, they're creating this personality or imbuing this personality into you. And sometimes you're trying to do the opposite of them. You know, my dad was really angry. I'd go the other way, you know, but basically I'm still operating from the same trauma, and we can touch on trauma a little bit later on. So what you actually find is that there is this knowing within us to be able to actually move towards something. And the problem is if we don't begin to interpret that from the level of the heart or the soul, we'll actually chase things to try and do it from us. So if we come back to that little child, their existence is actually external. Everything's external. They're cannibalistic by nature. So you look at mother's milk, you know, they're drinking mother's milk. Their needs are met externally. It's always external to them. All right. The challenge is to actually start to move to an internal based locus of identity as opposed to staying external, because otherwise we stay cannibalistic in who we are. Now, I've mentioned off camera that I did martial arts for many years, and part of the mysticism of that was the chi energy, you know, and we all brought up with I remember the Star Wars. I watched Star Wars when it first came out in 1978 or whatever it was at the Belgrave Cinema in Victoria. I remember sitting there with a bag of popcorn, you know, and watching this incredible thing as they're actually able to use this energy to move and, you know, and change things. And that was fascinating from my perspective. And so that really led me on this quest of actually, you know, we've got this chi energy within us. You know, how do we actually understand that? So if I loop back to that cannibalistic nature, is that what happens is that unless we, and the Chinese talk about a pre-heaven chi, it's like this energy that you're gifted with till you're about 21 years of age, you know, and so your son, Tim in the background there, Catherine, you know, he's you know, 21 years of age is when you really want to have converted it and start actually finding how you can actually get your energy from the inside. Because if you don't, you're going to stay cannibalistic in your nature. And so how do we actually start to feel the body? We feel it through drama and people around us. We need drama. We need emotional charge. We need all this sort of stuff. And we actually fuel this body externally to us without actually understanding how we can actually have this within starting to flow. So the seeker is where we delve into, and that starts us on this trajectory towards actually knowing ourselves. There you go, a bit of a ramble.
And I've heard for something new to evolve, for us to transition from one, in this example of what you're giving, for us to transition from one to another, something has to die within us. We have to let go of a past. We have to let go of an ego, whatever that is. Does that ring true with what you've learned and what you've come to understand through your studies?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at the symbol of the snake eating its tail, or Ouroboros, I think it's called. And the snake eating its tail is actually synonymous with things having to die. And so if let's look at trauma as an example. All right. So something happens. And, you know, as a child, let's look at it as a child. Now, a child doesn't have an adult brain. It may not have people or anyone around it that actually have a level of emotional intelligence, let alone the ability to have emotional literacy. Because if you don't have emotional language, you can't have emotional intimacy. So we look at that, and so an event actually happens. That's actually happened. Now that body of the child is actually no longer here anymore. If you're an adult, my version of me when I was 9 years old has died. Physically, our body has actually died. We've actually regenerated this whole body again. I mean, we look at it, and some trains of thought are saying that our body changes, regrows every 3 years or thereabouts. And so the cells are going. But how do we hold this trauma in our body continuously? You get to 54 years of age, and you're still in this snapshot phase, this frozen state of a 9-year-old within your physiology. Well, it's through here. It's through your mind, your ego, yeah. And we sit there and we keep looping and looping and looping and looping. And every time we bring new cells on, those new cells are imbued or embody this narrative of this incident that actually happened. So the incident happened, and it's really shit that it happened. It's really shit for a lot of people, but it happened, and you can't change that. But what you can start to look at is that, how do I change the story around this, which is fascinating. So yeah, I think I don't know if I answered your question, Steph. I went on a bit of a tangent there, but if you look at actually fire it back to me again, Steph.
Yeah, so the snake in itself, for something new to come in, something has to die. For what you're suggesting to me is our neurological pathways that have been formed at childbirth, or at some point in our youth, something happened, caused anxiety, caused fear, caused trauma. That neurological pathway has to be broken down. It has to be removed, I guess, for a new neurological pathway to be formed, hopefully in the present with much more intelligence, so that we don't carry that one. We just move forward with the new one.
Yeah. Well, so how long does that take? And so when you actually look at that, is how long does that take? Now, if you're using just the mind, it can take quite a while. But if you're actually using from the level of who you are, you change your locus of identity. So instead of being an external based locus of identity, it's an internal base. It's a knowing of who you are. It can change in the twinkling of an eye. That's what people regard as miracles. And we can see how that actually changes within the physiology. Anyone who's done any of the Joe Dispenza work, looked into that side of things, Bruce Lipton, there's quite a few out there who've had a beautiful language around this. When we actually look at when we start to change the processing up here, we actually also start to see that not only our body changes, but our environment changes. Relationships disappear. Relationships die. Relationships actually have the opportunity to become anew again. And we actually have to. So there's two things that we really don't like in life. We don't like chaos, and we don't like being uncomfortable. And so if we can be okay with what we perceive as discomfort, and we can be okay with chaos, and then we can actually step into a new way of actually being. And so they say that for people to change, the pain of maintaining the status quo has to be greater than the perceived pain of change. And that's a really big one to sort of sit with, is because a lot of the times, and this is why people think that the pain is your best teacher. It's not. It's shit. It really is a shit teacher. It teaches you, but it's shit. Because if it was a really good teacher, my grandkids, if I wanted to teach them something's hot, I'd get an iron and stick it on their hand. That'd teach them, but that's called abuse. So why are we using abuse as a model for change in ourselves over and over? Why don't we actually start to go, I remember when I turned 30, I got a tattoo on my back. I should have had it on my forehead. And I would have seen it. And maybe I should have had it backwards, so I would have seen it in the mirror. But it said, seeing with wisdom. I just had this epiphany to see with wisdom. And in other words, what I wanted to do was I didn't want to have to use pain and suffering as a model for change. I wanted to actually start to run with this, So what I did was I started, they say if you want to run faster, run with faster people. So I started running with people who actually had a lot of knowledge around this. And that's the other thing. People can't give you wisdom. There's a lot of people running on knowledge, teaching spiritual concepts, and they haven't actually embodied it themselves. And it's not a condemnation, but it's just a realization that there's a biblical principle saying, physician, heal thyself. You got to apply the shit to yourself first. And so you then come from an authentic state of the wisdom state rather than just a knowledge state. Because all you're going to do is you're just going to be talking semantics back and forth. Bloody great at parties. And I remember I learned how to play one song really well on the piano, and it was a Hill Street Blues song. And both hands were going, and I'd get on this and play the piano, and people say, "Oh shit, you're amazing! I'll play another one." Oh, maybe later on. So in their mind, they thought I was really friggin' good. I had no friggin' idea. I just learned how to just hit the keys in a certain way. But this is the birth of the actor. Is that what we actually see? And most people are working from an actor level, which is that second birth I talked with Carl Jung. So yeah, things do need to die, and the problem is that we've created a life around us. I think Bruce Lipton says, if you want to see what's going on inside you, look at the printout of your life. And you start to look at the world around you and you say, well, I hate where I'm working. I hate the relationship I hate how I look. There's all these sort of big emotions around it. And you go, okay, how are you going to change it? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move. I'm going to go into another relationship. I'm going to do another job. And you keep doing that. And you go, right, okay, same bum, different jocks. You've got to change the bum. Sorry, terrible analogy there. You've actually got to change who you are, and your printout of your life will change, and you'll start to embrace a different existence. Have you guys had much to do with the church environment or the Bible and all that sort of stuff?
Minimal.
All right, I'm going to do a bit of a Bible story.
Okay.
The Aussie version. All right, so
let's do it.
So most of us are familiar with Jesus walking on the water. Yeah. You've heard that saying,
100%.
All right, so a little bit of background. So they've just done the loaves and the fishes. Most of us have heard that story as well. Jesus has gone to the disciples, all right, lads, jump in a boat. You shoot across the lake. I'm going to walk around and I'll see you on the other side. And they go, yeah, no worries, boss. We'll jump in there, and they start doing it. So they go out into the lake, and all of a sudden this big storm comes up, and they're just like, they're crapping themselves, right? So they've just come off a miracle of the loaves and fishes. Basically, you had a handful of bread and a whole load of fishes and fed 5,000 people, out of that amount, all right? So they've just witnessed a friggin' miracle, if we look at the story. And so anyway, they're on this boat, and the boat's just crashing around, and they're really just, they're shitting themselves. And out of the firmament, out of the, they could see in the mist this figure walking through them, and half of them went, "Oh shit, it's a demon or something like that, or something scary." And I think it was Simon Peter said, "Hey, look, actually, I think that's Jesus there, all right." And he yells, "Hey, Jesus, if it's you, beckon me to come to you," because he's walking on this water towards him. And so Jesus says, "All right, lad, come on out." So he starts walking on the water, and then he starts looking around him, shits himself, and starts to sink. And he goes, "Help me, help me." And basically Jesus reaches down, picks up, grabs his hand, and he says, "You little faith." All right. And then brings him back to the boat and puts him in with the disciples. Now that's a beautiful story. It's really, the church will grab onto that and we'll talk about how amazing Jesus was, which, yeah, that's great, but it's analogous. And if we look into the analogy of it, it's really quite powerful because it actually shows us, and we link this in with the 3 births that Carl Jung talks about. All right. So the first birth we're born into is the birth of the water. That's a water birth. All right. Now that's a fascinating thing. You've heard blood is thicker than water. How would you interpret that, Steph? Blood is thicker than water.
Family is blood.
Right. Yeah. See, that's how we've all been told it is, but it's actually not it. Family is water. It's water of the womb. So the blood is, what is blood? Well, blood, that's what a wedding is, a marriage is supposed to be synonymous of, is a blood covenant. Okay. So blood is thicker than water. You leave your mother and father and join with a wife was, a religious thing. So there's a blood covenant that sits there. So what happens is we're born into the water realm and then we're underwater. So what we know is the word spirit and air is interchangeable. All right. So we're in an airless environment. We're a spiritless environment, which is the realm of the mind. All right. So that's that we've moved. And so we're in this realm of the mind and we're swimming around and we're just existing. And this is how most people exist. All right, we're staying in this existent state. Then all of a sudden, what'll happen is you'll reach up. I've just hit the caravan roof here. You'll reach up, and yes, I live in a caravan, guys. You reach up and you pull yourself up and you go, and what you've reached up and you've grabbed a book. You might have read the Celestine Prophecies, had a great chat with Steph or Catherine, at a coffee shop, and they've just said something that sort of went, oh, hang on a second, there's more to life. And you reach up and you go, and you've grabbed a piece of driftwood. And then you go, shit, I feel a little bit better. So this is the birth of the seeker. So you grab another bit of driftwood and another bit of driftwood and you strap them together and you climb up on top of them. And that's your raft. All right. And you sit there in this raft. And then you'll see other big rafts out there of people who've got a ton of driftwood. And they'll go, come over, be on my raft. I'll look after you. I'll tell you how to think. And so people will go and follow a lot of other people. They'll go to the church and they'll follow people's interpretation of it. And so you're on this raft, but eventually your raft becomes waterlogged because you'll find you've gone to what you've done your 40th ayahuasca journey. You've done peyote up your nose and I won't go there. But you've got all this stuff that's going on. You've had all these amazing sort of books that you've read, workshops. You've happy clapped to the cows come home. You've hugged so many people, and then you just go. But life hasn't changed that much. I can act it, but when I go home away from those workshops, I look in the mirror and I just see the actor. And so you delve into the realm of shame and guilt, and you self-flagellate yourself. But what that is a beautiful moment. It's a death moment. Now the problem is, and I've been there, and as I said, when I flicked you guys the info, I tried to take myself out. And, through suicide, and didn't do that very well, thank God. And what happened was that it was shame and guilt. I was a burden to everyone around me. So instead of realizing that I was looking for a permanent solution to a temporary problem, I just went, I can't do this anymore. And so really what was actually saying is that something needs to die. Something needs to die. And the problem is, if you're only in your mind, it's like trying to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, by your shoelaces. You can't do it. It's impossible to do. So you'll go out and you'll outsource and you'll get all this help from people that'll keep you alive, which is friggin' unreal. They can keep you alive. And I remember when I went and saw this psychologist, and he said, Dunk, he said, seesaw. He said, what happens is on a seesaw, we've all done this to our cousins where we're bigger than, we're sitting on the seesaw and they're right at the top there and we just jump off and they fall over and hit the ground. It was really funny when you're a kid, but you realise it's not really nice to do. So this seesaw, he said, what we've got to do is that every time I put a good thing on this end, it just slides down because you're in this shit. So bad shit, good shit. All right. He said, what we've got to do is we've got to prop it up. We've got to put a little chunk of stuff under there, and that chunk of stuff. And I went, and that was my surrender moment. I said, right, all my beliefs, all my thoughts and stuff like that, everything's on the table. All right. So one of the things that I went to a looking at an SSRI, an antidepressant, and I hated the feel of that because I needed to feel what I was going through for me. Now, everyone make your own choice on that. But I needed to feel what I wanted to feel, so I went off it pretty quick. I think I was only on it for about 6 or 7 weeks, and it was just like, nah, I'm too numb here. I need to not be numb. I need to feel what I'm feeling. Because I was also doing a lot of other stuff in the background. I was reading a lot of Joe Dispenza. I was meditating. I was running. I was moving. I was eating. I was just going, right, I'm going to do everything I know how to do to get myself moving in the right direction. And so what happens is as I came along that realization of that, I could pull that out of the way. And then the seesaw could actually disappear as well, and I could just be me. And so what happened is that I actually began to see that something did need to die. And so for me, that was a relationship that I was in. That needed to die. It also needed to be the relationship I had with, the people around me. That needed to die. I left that karate. I was chatting about before, particular style of karate. I went to a different style of karate. I let things die. And I had to be okay with my ex at the time, which is the relationship I walked away from, which is quite funny because I've had 3 marriages. The first was a marriage of the births. Second was a marriage of the ego. So the third one is a marriage of this incredible woman, Kat, who's the marriage of consciousness. It's a beautiful marriage. But the second one was this marriage of ego, utter ego, sociopathic nature, and both of us did. It was quite perverse. But when I actually let that go, I was told that I'm going to be in financial ruin. I went, okay, if that's what it is. If I have to lose everything to find myself, hell yeah. Give me that. There's a guy called Carl Jung, and he used to be a comedian. He's just does incredible work. And he says, merge me with my soul no matter what. And that's a powerful, merge me with my heart no matter what. Bloody courage to say that, because look out if you really want to do that.
That's a tough journey, going from something, anything, doesn't matter, to absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
That's like, I can imagine a lot of people would struggle with that. I've experienced it myself. That's a big journey to go through when times are tough as well, on top of the other stuff that's going on. But anyway, mate, there's so much that you're sharing with us here, especially in that space of trauma. Was there anything in particular that helped you when you were doing your meditation, you're reading, you've made the decision, you've got the awareness and all these things happening? Was there any little insight that you could share with our listeners, just in case there's someone out there? Because this journey is not easy, but compared to where someone might be in the shit pit, at the bottom where there is very little light to be seen, the tunnel, it's a long way off. And they have to then do hard work, do more to pull themselves out, to pick themselves up, to get out of bed in the morning, to do whatever it is, to just transition from one day to the next, survive the next hour, whatever it is. Was there anything that really worked well for you?
Yeah. We come back to the analogy that I talked about with the water. All right. So you start to wash your mind. You wash your mind. I love
that.
All right. And you've got to actually, so how do you wash your mind? Words are water. So you start connecting in, for me, I would put headphones on and I'd be just listening to stuff that actually had a narrative that was completely different to the narrative that was trying to. So your mind pushes you into survival. All right. It does not know how to teach you thriving. Whereas you can actually tap into other people around. This is why it's so beautiful. We've got so many modalities out there. And even though I sort of, a bit of a jibe at people, knowledge and wisdom, you'll know the ones like you did with the kinesiology, Steph. You know the ones who are the real deal, sort of thing. And so what you've got a barometer within you. You'll know that you know, because especially if they keep wanting you to hold on to them, that's the ones you need to let go. But what I did was I started listening to Joe Dispenza. I started listening to, just meditating. In the middle of the night, I was living in Noosa at the time. My brain would just friggin' just be looping. And I just went, right, we're running. And I'm going to run until you stop. And so I'm running around Noosa, the garbos and, the grease trap cleaners. That's not a good smell running through, just letting you know. Try and hold your breath longer. But running through Noosa, under street lights, and I'd do 16 Ks. I just run. I just keep running. And I think what you've got to do is that no one's going to save you. And it's hard words. No one's going to save you. You've got to save yourself. And how do you save yourself? Start. Just start with one thing. And the big thing for it is stick things in your ears. Stop watching the shit on TV and stick good stuff in your ears. Start watching stuff on TV that actually nourishes your soul. They say you are what you eat. Food is it's not just what you put in your mouth. Food is what you put in your ears and your head. So you start, because you've got your mind that's been programmed. So you're still working from that external based identity that was created for you, not by you. You're now got to create this new identity, this beautiful identity. Now, it's still spiritual ego. That's okay. You're creating an identity because eventually both of those collapse and disappear and you actually step into the fullness of who you are. But the spiritual ego is what you start to grow and you start to listen to it. So it's a washing your mind with words. Start to wash them. You start to create a different language within your mind. And before long, the noise in your from this other side begins to subside. You're a piece of shit. You're worth nothing. See, you're ashamed. It's guilt. Look, you can't even do this. You're the worst father in the world. Da, 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 da. And it just gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And what comes up is that incredible. Isn't this world what a bloody gift? Well, you've been gifted this meat suit to dance in this world. Have a freaking good time. Let's move forward. And what you'll start to find is as you do that, the world around you mirrors the reflection of who you are. And you start to find there is change occurs. It is a spiritual principle that is what happens. As you start to change that narrative in your mind, you start to change. I heard this person the other day talking about the 7 states of water. And one of the states of water is thought. So sit with that. One of the states of water is thought. And I just went, oh, now I can't prove it, but it feels true. And so you sort of sit with that and you go, wow, one of the states of water is thought. Wow. So if I can play with the water, which is the water of my mind, it's a biblical and I'm not Christian or religious or anything like that. I just really appreciate these texts that may have been bastardized, but like Pinocchio, you could actually follow the religion of Pinocchio. It's a bloody good story about transformation. I want to be a real boy. And eventually he does. And what does he do? He swims out and he that old version of him dies and a new version comes forward. Not physically. He doesn't die physically. He gets swallowed by a whale, which is quite profound, actually. And he meets his Geppetto, which is actually him, another version of him, that has always been saying, come home, son. And you come home to that. And so I should start a church around the Pinocchio church, shouldn't I? I should be making a monster. But it is these beautiful nursery rhymes that have been sitting out there, these beautiful stories, the story of Alice in Wonderland, the story of, who's the chick who ran along the golden the golden road? I've gone blank. The Wizard of Oz. So the Wizard of Oz, look behind the veil. What's really pulling it? Well, that's your mind. That little man pulling all these sort of things, that's your mind. And you go, oh, I see the illusion. So, yeah, the advice I'd give, Steph, is start to put things into your mind until you actually find who you really are. Now, there's so many things you can do. You can do meditation. There's so many therapies out there, all right? You can get lost. You've got to move from living a life of outsourced. You've got to insource. And you can't insource from a mind level. You've got to insource from a heart level, all right? And so the mind will always outsource. I need more information. That's beautiful. So like for us guys, and it's we look at with blokes is that most blokes have got a very low in emotional literacy. And you want to be emotionally intimate with, start with emotional literacy. And first of all, so, a good friend of mine, we're doing some work in the background, James Greenshield with Emergent Leaders, incredible bloke. I'm going to connect you guys in with him because he'd be a beautiful one to have on the podcast. He, we talk, men have anger on top of sadness and women typically have sadness on top of anger. Typical, all right? So I'm just generalizing. But they're both umbrellas. What sits below that is the real depth of who we are. Now, that's the water realm I talk about. All right. So the water realm is your mind realm. So once you actually are on this raft, this driftwood raft I'm talking about, and you start and then eventually it said, come and walk on water. You become the Jesus. That's what Jesus is basically saying to Simon, mate, greater works you're going to do. Come on, you start walking on the water as well. So in other words, you work from spirit. Now, what do we know? The words spirit and air are interchangeable. Spirit and breath are interchangeable. When you do that, you can start diving into that water and you can start moving through those undercurrents that are, as Carl Jung says, until we make the unconscious conscious, it'll rule our life and we'll call it fate. So until we make the unconscious conscious, it'll rule our life and we'll call it fate. Until we understand the undercurrents that are moving us around and start to bring light to those. And, we there's a lot of terms out there that have been so trodden on, shadow work is actually such a, it's, I come and do shadow work, and, And people don't understand what shadow work is. It's actually getting to know the aspects of yourself, and being able to be in relationship with them.
One small example that I have, I guess, that relates to what you were just sharing is Catherine bought my boys this deck of breath cards. And each night we just flip over a new breath card and we give it a try. And some of the breath cards, they're fine, but they don't really hit. They don't land. And so we found a breath card where we're all just like, that's a good one, and I think that is probably, for me, what I'm taking from your share is that you may not find the right one immediately. You might have to look, you might have to keep digging, because it's all breathwork cards. They're all the same modality, but it's just that there's a slight change to one practice to the next that makes all the difference.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's beautiful because we're so bespoke in who we are. We are all fractals of an amazing consciousness. And, this is what, the namaste, the word namaste is the recognition of that in each other. When we sit there at the end of yoga, namaste, and people just walk away and they don't realize, hang on a second, I've just seen the essence of me in you, and I see the essence of you in me. And that's coming from that greater consciousness level. And so we have to, but we're also like the biodiversity is such a great thing. I mean, we've screwed it over with this bloody diversity and inclusion shit that's going on in the wokeism. I won't go there too much, but what it's doing is it's actually creating division. It's creating identity politics. In other words, what we're doing is we're ID entities. We're creating entities based on ID. We're not coming down to who we really are. We need to let that shit go. To be able to actually understand who we are. We've got to stop barracking for teams and actually appreciate the beautiful thing that we are, the essence of who we are and the bespoke nature. So, we start to find different modalities for different people, and it's like, when you're on a health journey. And actually, my definition of health is return to wholeness. That's my definition of health. And so, one of the aspects of health is mental health. Should I go there? I'll go there. All right. Mental health. I'm not talking about psychiatric disorders. I'm talking about mental health. We are bandering. There was a comedian who came up. I saw it just recently, a little clip, and he said, somebody said to him, "Yeah, I went for a walk. It was really good for my mental health." No, you went for a walk. Stop labeling yourself for mental health, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand ourselves based on labels. What I do is, and James Greenshield and I have been really having good chats about this, and it's moving. We don't use the word mental health in our space. We use the word vitality. So if you say I'm trying to fix my mental health, and you just say that to yourself, just say I'm working on my mental health. And you could have flowers and everything around. I'm working on my mental health. But then you actually flip it and you say, I'm working on my vitality. Fuck, there's ownership with that.
Yeah.
Sorry about the F-bomb. I'll probably drop a few more. But there is energy about that. First of all, what's the first bit of energy that sits there when you actually say vitality? I'm actually focused on vitality.
It's your energy and your frequency. It feels as though you're uplifting and really expanding on what it is that makes you.
Ownership, integrity, accountability. All right. And so this is what we've actually got to work on. So when we actually go on mental health, now I know I've been in the depths of despair. I tempted to take my own life. All right. I know what it's like to be that low. And you sit there and you just can't even think at times. All right. And so, jumping and grabbing the help. And as I said, one of the best things I did was just washing my mind with water. What that actually did was actually started to changing the internal narrative that was going on. I actually then started to be accountable to myself. I started to have a language that I worked with. So the word vitality actually now goes, whew, I'm working on vitality. okay, oh shit, I've got to be accountable for this. I've got to be accountable that I get up and go to the gym. I know for myself, carrying a little bit of weight, but I'm more than I really want to. And it's my own choice at that point in time. But it's now, yeah, great. I look at that and go, no, I'm not doing that anymore. Vitality is what I'm chasing. Not chasing. Vitality is my normal state. And so I actually start to move towards vitality with an absolute. If we look at the word effort, oh, effort. What about effortless effort? So effortless effort. Effort needs motivation. Effortless effort needs is inspiration.
Mm. It's inspired action, isn't it?
Inspired, or
Yeah.
in spirito, or in spirit, which is actually coming from the nature of who you are. So all of a sudden you're moving from this internal space. And so, a lot of the guys, and I've been to these men's groups, and and certainly, the current men's groups, that needs to do an Ouroboros. It needs to actually eat its tail and die, because there's something new that wants to come forward in these men, for not just men, but for women as well. There's something beautiful is actually coming forward. So most of the men's groups are built on warrior and lover. They don't really understand the sovereign, the king. They don't understand the magician. And the magician is actually incredible. So if you're a warrior going into battle against a magician, you're going to get your ass handed back to you in a heartbeat. It's not the way to enter. And it's baby shit. We need to actually move into the sovereign. The sovereign is this internal space of accountability. How many men groups? I've sat in a few men's groups and I've listened to people bitching and moaning and complaining about their ex. And I'm thinking, would you date you? Oh, yeah. And so this is, we talk about holding the standard high. There's a beautiful interview with Paul Roos on the Warren Treadray show, the Ballsy show. And Paul Roos talks about we've actually settled for mediocre. We settle for mediocre as the standard instead of actually saying, mate, set your standards high. Set your standards high. And we hold the standard. And that's a problem we have now. I mean, the last 4 years, and I won't go there too much, but the last 4 years I was working for a pharmaceutical company. No, 20 years I was working in pharmaceutical. That's a different story. And that was thinking that I can change from the internal out. To a degree, I'll own that shit. It was actually for money. Actually, I'll change that. I actually did that because I was chasing money. And that's where I thought happiness. I was actually going beyond that. I was chasing numbness. I talked about those basic qualities that we had as a child. Those basic qualities we have as a child, these reflex actions that come through, there is a knowing of this state called ease, the effortless effort, ease state. It's also, we could feel it as bliss. But what we do is, if we're only interpreting that through the mind, we'd interpret it through numbness, drugs, sex, entertainment, work, sleep, eating. We're just numbing ourselves because we don't want to go into the discomfort of who we really, to find who we really are. Have you read the Alchemist? You would have read it, Catherine. I don't know. Have you read it, Steph?
No.
Great book to read. Really short one. Paulo Coelho, I think it is the guy who wrote it. Friggin' unreal thing, because it actually talks about this, is that the discovery, who he really was this amazing journey that he did. It's actually a really good book. It's a very short book. But it's a beautiful one because it also shows the three births as well within it as well, when you actually start overlapping that. And so what he did was he chased things. He was chasing something. And a lot of the satisfaction he actually had was around numbness sort of thing. But there was an inner knowing that he actually had. And so there's this beautiful state that we can enter called ease. And there's actually 3 words you can say to yourself to experience what that's like. And we'll do this actually, just to yourself. Let's just do this. Just say to yourself, I am enough.
Yeah.
You sit with that and you feel that land and you repeat it again to yourself. I am enough. Oof. That's where we live from. And the problem is that we actually sit there and we try and find out who we are because we think we're not enough. I'm enough. You know, my beautiful wife and I, we sold up our house, we paid off all our debts, and we sent ourselves on a trajectory, walked away from the corporate environment, and cleared the debts and had a pocket full of money. And we got a caravan and we got a car, and we've just stepped into the unknown. And some people would say that's chaos. What about survival? You know, what about a rainy day? You know, what about, when you get older, where's your house? And it's like, okay, yep, I can run that narrative as well, but I'm not going to, because what I'm looking at is, I'm actually aligning myself with this space of ease. Now, this doesn't mean I'm a bum. Effortless effort. I love working hard for the right reason. I love building shit. I love having beautiful conversations. I love, creating stuff. But I want to work from the inspired state, the vitality state, And so, I mean, there's so many tangents we can go on, but it's, if we keep it, if we look at this idea of mental health, anything that uses fear, fight, or commercializing, that's a big red flag. We're fighting mental health. We're fighting cancer. We're fighting this. If you're in a fight, step into sovereignty. Stop using your friggin' warrior. It's not the way to actually work through things. If fear is used as a motivation, which is what, I walked away. I was working for a pharmaceutical company and refused to get the jab because my knowing of sovereignty was that, well, first of all, I saw red flags when I saw fear being used as a motivation, and I just went, no, I'm not doing that. And so I actually had to get down to the biggest part of that fear was I had to be okay with losing everything. What would that feel like? And got down to the rawness of that. I didn't get the sack. I was working for a pharmaceutical company. I navigated that for a better part of a year. And when all the mandates lifted, I left. Didn't leave to go to anything. And this doesn't mean being a hero. It was just the knowing that I knew that I'm not going to work from a fear base. I knew I had enough. My relationship, there's a beautiful woman I had on a podcast that I did, Dr. Sarah Farrant. Got a book somewhere, probably any. But Dr. Sarah Farrant, she's written a book on the vital truth, and she talks about vitalize. And there are three pillars of health. There's the allopathic, which is your mainstream medicine. All right, beautiful in a crisis. The second one is the alternative. All right, but both of these still run on symptoms, treating symptoms, trying to get rid of symptoms. The third one is actually about the vital. What is and she calls it, so you got allopathic, you got alternative, and you got the alternate. So the alternate is that the wisdom that we have in our body is actually is what we want to tap into. So most of us will get a head cold. So I've just come off, I'm a little bit raspy, but I came off what people would call a head cold, and I don't know, I've got different thoughts on it. So if I look at a virus, for example, right? So what are you going to do, Steph? If you're going to detox yourself, mate, what are three things you would do?
Fast, drink lots of water, rest, take minimal medication, let the body go through the high temperature, burn off whatever it needs to kill, and then stand up 3 days later, maybe.
Perfect. What does a virus do to you? Temperature, you don't want to eat, and you sweat. All right. I usually jump in a sauna if I'm going to do a bit of a detox and stuff like that. But yeah, the temperature, your temperature comes up. So instead of actually trying to get rid of it, why don't you actually sit there and go, what are you trying to show me?
Yeah.
And what it showed me was like, mate, you need to start moving again. You've been stagnant. You're stagnant. You need to move. You're congested. You're congested in your physiology. All right. And I went, oh, thank you. And so I actually sat with it. And then I actually went to the next question. Well, How do I come into relationship with this? And it was like, magnesium. I'll get some magnesium into me. Olive leaf extract. Okay. B12. Cool. Methyl blue. Not yet. I'll do that afterwards. So there was a few little things that were sort of popping into my psyche. Drink a lot of water. Really nourish your body. Move away from move more towards a primal eating. So, a paleo eating or a ketogenic style of eating. I went, cool. I went to that. And I nourished my body. I didn't, there are a couple of coughing fits. I go, oh, for God's sake, give me a break. But the reality is, it was in complete relationship with it. I was not trying to get rid of it. I was not fighting it. I was with it. And I actually appreciated it. I love, I had a real gratitude for it. And that's another word that's been bloody trampled all over. So I we've got to actually start to change our relationship with things. And if you listen to what I'm actually saying with, what I was just saying then, it was actually about accountability, internal knowing, stepping into that space and actually starting to don't be a grifter. A grifter is somebody who wouldn't buy something they're selling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many people are sitting in the medical space that are so unhealthy? I used to call on specialists, and I'll tell you what, probably most of them are the most unhealthy people I've ever met. Working with really unhealthy people who won't be accountable. Some are. But then you've also got in the alternative space as well. It's, some of these beautiful people are actually on stage, they're great, but behind the scenes, it's an act. So I taught my little beautiful, I've got this gorgeous granddaughter, and she's just 10, and her nickname's Moo. And I said, Moo, right. I taught her the three births. The first, the physical birth, the Carl Jung concept. And I said, the second birth is the birth of the actor. The actor, all right, it's up on stage. And I said, and it's fueled through drama. And she says, is that drama like school? And I said, it's exactly like school. All right. And so what happens is that you're running on the narratives of the world around you that are telling you how to live a certain way. And so when I was talking about the spiritual ego coming in, is you're actually now writing a new narrative, but you're still working from a mind level, but you're writing this new narrative, and you're introducing new narratives in there based on you choosing some things that would nourish you. You're starting to move, you are what you eat. So you're starting to eat better food, And so, and I said, and what that'll do is it'll actually start to introduce you to the third birth of who you really are. A 10-year-old can get that.
Yeah.
We now have conversations around, because I said, look for the actors around you, but look for the actor in yourself. When are you being an actor? And so when I caught up with her the other day, I said, could you see when you're being an actor? And she said, I can, Granddad. I said, cool. A 10-year-old understands the energy of the actor. And so we've got to actually start to become internally accountable.
That's a big concept.
Kids.
Bloody 10-year-old.
It's a huge concept, though. Like, as an adult, to look at that. As a child, they just embrace it. They don't.
They do. Yeah.
They get it because they're so much more in touch. We've got so many more layers of junk on top of it in so many ways.
We do. We've got to actually get to the stage where we find our original face, the face we had before our parents were born.
Yeah.
And we've got to start to question the narratives around us. So, like the 5 Love Languages book, worst book ever written in my eyes. I've got to piss so many people off saying that. We won't cut that out either. I'll tell you why. Because it missed a chapter. It missed a final chapter. The chapter was, why am I like this? Why am I like this? Why do I need somebody to perform in a certain way for me to feel loved? Why do I need to perform in a certain way for them to feel loved? In my eyes, it's prostitution, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got to dance in a certain way. So the question is, most people are actually working from a very fundamental principle, is that I don't feel safe. So like I had this real epiphany, and it was a good one for me. I was always known as the caring, really everyone would come to me at school and I'd always be trying to help people and fix people and all that sort of stuff. But when I looked at the core of that, do you know what I found? I was manipulating people. I was manipulating them because if they looked at me in a certain way, I wouldn't get attacked and I'd feel safe. Now, does it mean I'm an asshole? I might be Satan to some people, but I'm certainly not but that's okay. But the thing is that I actually started to really embrace that. How do I actually work authentically? Another word that's been trampled all over. Anyway, we'll get that back. But how do we work authentically? And how do I actually work from a heart? So empaths aren't born, they're created.
Yeah, out of a need to protect themselves.
Absolutely. Same as a psychopath.
Yeah.
Same as a sociopath. Why are they? That's a trauma response. And I hate the word trauma because I think that's another one that people have been grabbing onto as an identity. I worked in disabilities a little bit, just to step back into it to see what it was like. And it was all trauma-informed care. We were working with kids. Now, that's great to actually understand that was the etiology, but it doesn't excuse behaviour. We need to work a different way. And we need to teach these young men, these young boys to be men. And we've got to do that by setting the standard. Not continually, being part of the problem, which is allowing them to stay deep in their wound and excusing. And this is and again, this will probably come under flack, and I'm sorry, guys. I own this shit. They didn't say this. But it is, we actually have to move beyond these bullshit models. And we've actually got to go and start to teach it. And the problem is we haven't got too many people out there that are actually prepared to step up and actually set the standard higher.
Yeah.
Let's set the standards higher. Let's set the standards higher. And I think that's what I start to see more and more and more. I had this conversation with one young lad, and he was a young adult I was working with, and he was quite profane in the way he was talking about women. It was really disgusting. And he asked me, and I said, I don't talk like that. I said, you think a woman's going to talk to you, if you're going to consider him that way? And he just said, well, why would the organisation I'm with give me pornographic movies and stuff like that? And I just went, I said, exactly. I said, why are you watching them? That's more the question. Why don't you set the standard higher, mate? And that changed. There was a moment. And I said, you need to be I actually said, you need to be a fucking man. Stop being a boy. Be a man. And how do you do that? You start to own your shit and you start to actually think about what you're saying.
Random question, mate. Just it popped into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I see all these groups that are now like, we're taking males and giving them their power back and training them to be men. And they're doing like these military boot camps where it's like, you're going to shape up and see that you've got more below the surface. You think you might not have it in you, but we're going to show you do. I'm sure you're familiar with that sort of thing. What's your thoughts on those?
Oh, shit.
Groups?
I've had James here. He's the next major in the Australian Army. You're fascinating one. Throw the question at him as well. But my thoughts on that is that what you're doing is you're not coming down to the foundation of who the person is. Have you read the David R. Hawkins' book, Power versus Force? All right. If we keep using force as a modality, so if you look at David Goggins,
yeah,
he's done some amazing stuff, an incredible human when you actually look at it. Why? And if you come to if anyone has read his story, yeah. So his foundation for what he does has actually come from that space. Who would he be if he actually came to the foundation of that and changed that? And that's where we need to actually work. You sit there, and the problem is a lot of these men that are running it, there's so many of men that are actually in wound themselves. And how many people have started up therapy practices because they're actually talking from the wound. I was sexually abused, therefore I've got better now, so I'm going to actually help women, in sexual abuse. And you go, okay, have you really got better? Because you're still staying the identity of that.
What do you think they're really looking for under the surface then? If it's not that kind of force mentality.
Mm,
Where do you think we need to step into to support men more? Is it in that
yeah,
emotional literacy that you were talking about before?
absolutely. Emotional literacy is a great place to start. Is to actually start to understand it. I think some beautiful, and this is what you tapped into in your interview. I heard Steph with kinesiology. You started to feel. You might not have had words, but you actually had a connection. You started to feel it in your body. As the practitioner was moving around your body and actually touching areas, what was happening is subconsciously you're actually coming into awareness, and you're moving the subconscious into the conscious, and so you started to change that side of things. You know, there are we hold that in our physiology. We hold ourselves prisoner through the narratives in our mind. And so, to where do we need to actually start with this? Yeah, I mean, some of those practices can be great to actually take a person out bush. But what are you doing out bush, and who's taking them out there? If you go out bush with James Greenshield, yeah, you'll change. One of the most disrupt. The so if we look at a rebel, a person who's a rebel. A rebel needs an authority to rebel against. They don't exist without the authority.
Mm.
But a disruptor doesn't need an authority. They just live. They're just being who they are. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to use force in these men's group. We're trying to rebel against this expression that we're having in our life by doing something external and masculine and solid and all that sort of stuff. And some people can have some changes. It might give them a bit of space. And I think a lot of these groups has given guys some space and it's done some great work. But the problem is that unless you actually fix the narrative, that space will disappear. How many people go on retreats and have
Yeah.
this incredible experience in retreats, and then they come home and they
Isn't
haven't got the
fixed.
tools? They don't know how to
Yeah.
change that because they haven't really changed inside. They've got a knowledge of it. They may have even had a visceral change. They might have been able to create space, but they don't know how to go beyond. And so part of it is, I mean, this is some of the stuff that James and I've been working on. I've been doing a bit of freelance stuff with James, is that we're looking at the harmonic villages. We're looking at how do we actually create bring back the elders, bring back the wisdom. Now, there's a lot of boys in old suits that are running around. That's not elders. We see a lot of that. We see a lot of people who are in these men's group that are actually teachers and leaders. They're not leaders. They're still operating from their own wound. And we've got to have the courage to actually talk about letting things die. Are you prepared to let that die so the real you can come forward? Now, the real you may actually still play in that area, but it'll actually birth something more beautiful. Every men's group has the same etiology behind it. Same bum, different jocks. All right, they're doing this. It's basically dressed up the same. We need to do something so radically different, and the radical difference is we've got to set a standard higher, and we've got to teach these. I wrote to you guys about my son Tim getting run down. That's probably another conversation for another day. But to actually get him back is that we actually had to change the narratives around us. We had to be radical in who we were, and actually believe and trust in a different depth of things. And so I had to step up as a leader in that space and actually say, we're not going to survive this. We're going to thrive. And what was going to take 3 years in brain rehab, we did in 3 months.
It's amazing.
And that's probably a story for another day. But what we start to look at is that we actually need to change the way we approach this. We need to bring the elders back in. We need true leaders to step into this space, not the ones operating from wound. And how do we do that? You need to actually be able to know, how do you get in touch with that wound aspect of yourself? It's pretty easy to do. Where am I manipulating people around me? Where am I manipulating people around? Where am I outsourcing my energy? I need people. Grumpy old man syndrome. Jeez. Grumpy old man syndrome is I need the world to perform in a certain way for me to feel stable and safe.
Yeah.
That's where you start. Or your 5 love languages. That's a good place to start. Why am I like that?
Yeah.
Which is a great one. I mean, there's also an unknown. Can we let something die? You remember the Indiana Jones movie where he had to walk and step into that unknown void?
Yeah.
I'm a big Indiana Jones fan. And he stepped into that unknown and all of a sudden, as he stepped, he landed on this invisible bridge. And sometimes we've got to let things die for something new to come forward. We're so used to swinging from one vine and having the other vine in our hand. Now, if you do that, you're going to do what's that cross thing that they do in the Olympics?
Yeah, the rings.
Yeah, the rings. All right. Can't stay there for long. All right. Even the gymnast can't stay there for too long. We have to learn how to swing and sometimes let go and grab onto something more. And I think this is what we need to do in life, is that when we're seeing, has suicide rates declined? No, they're going through the roof. I've just been around the regional towns of Victoria, some of the regional towns of Victoria, and they're through the roof there. Farmers topping themselves,
Wow.
and everyone is they're actually trauma bonded. The connection is not community, they're trauma bonded. And that's a beautiful one to have a chat with James if you have a discussion with him. But it's the trauma bonding is that people are having connection with each other based on a wound. Now, we know if a wound is not allowed to heal, it'll fester. We have to heal those wounds. And how do we heal those wounds? We have to entrain ourselves to a new modality, which is our heart, our soul. And that's, that we look at the old clockmakers of old, and it was the biggest clock, I'm going to pronounce that right, clock in the room that actually caused all the other clocks to entrain to it. You do this, you've seen those things with the metronomes where they flick the metronomes and all going, and then eventually they're actually clicking together.
Yeah.
They're entraining to an intention that's sitting in that space, because the person looking at it goes, I reckon they're going to actually come together. Well, they don't realize it's like the quantum physics, which slit it'll go through. It's the one you think about. But it's the entrainment. We need to actually create a different level of entrainment. You cannot run a men's group if you haven't calibrated to yourself, because you will entrain them back to what you've done is the wound. You need to entrain them beyond the wound.
So in that process, for some, if we're needing to step up, work from a higher place, my only concern is that it takes quite a decent amount of self-awareness for someone to look internal and then start at the 5 love languages, like you said. Which one am I? Okay. And then, okay, why do I come from that space? Like, that is not a simple little process. Like, some people would really struggle to even look at themselves and think, I'm the problem. It can be, oh no, everyone else is the problem, I'm perfect. Like, there's a lot of work that has to happen in that.
Well, I mean, there's probably two answers to that. You're born at this time in the earth because you can do it. You're born at this time in the earth. You've got information around you out the wazoo. You've got every opportunity now gifted to you to be able to do it freely, pretty well freely. The second thing is that it's a lot easier to make a child change because they haven't been indoctrinated. And that's why, we're having to actually do this work after multiple years of indoctrination. And, we sit there in our own shame shit show of the way we've done things because we have this new epiphany of who we are. And we actually then use that as a flagellation tool to condemn ourselves from the past. We didn't know any different back then. That's okay. You didn't know any different back then. Who you are now, you actually set a new foundation for it. Is it hard? Yeah, absolutely. But come back to the old thing, is that when maintaining the status quo is more painful than the perceived pain of change, that's when you'll change. Have some fucking balls and start to change. Have the courage to start to change. Is it hard? I think it's a cop-out. Sorry, Steph. I think a lot of guys, a lot of women as well. It's a cop-out. It's too hard. No, it's not.
I think it's harder staying where you are.
Yeah, because you don't know. We always want to know. I mean, you imagine, I heard somebody say this the other day, these vision boards. All right. You imagine if you're a 20-year-old, right? Here we go, Steph. Right. 20-year-old, right? Doing all your fitness stuff. And you're sitting there talking consciousness shit. Can you imagine talking to that 20-year-old back then that, hey, Steph, when you turn this age, you're going to be talking about consciousness and you're going to talk about spirituality and all that sort of stuff. You go, fuck off. That's not who I am. You know what I mean? The problem is that we're an artifact of the past in our visioning of the future. Can we actually let go of the past, live in who we are now? And again, present moment is a load of shit for a lot of people. It's another thing that's been trodden all over. But can we actually live in the space of ease, the I am enough, and then move from that and start to envision from the I am enough space? So most of us will envision a vision board based on pain that we're in. More money.
Yeah, more stuff.
More love, more relationships, more this, more jobs, more this, because we're trying to escape instead of actually moving closer to the fire, which is an illusion. The fire is actually an illusion. The fire actually is where you actually need to step through. And as it gets more, as the temperature starts to come up, we know with the fever, like we're talking about with the, when you're under the influence of a virus, the fever is the breaking point. It's the point where it actually changes. And can you be with that? Can you actually be? It's like an ice bath. You ice bath, Steph, I'd say. How many guys I've seen jump out and squeal, I can't do this. Why? You're not dying here. You're okay. And it's because the whole nervous system is so primed to fear and survival. And the reality is you can do this. You just step back in, you do 3 seconds more. You keep moving. It's not a force. You're not forcing an outcome. I'm going to stay in here for 3 minutes, and your nervous system's pinging and you get out, and your nervous system's now been innovated even worse. No, you get out, but you actually sit back in there and actually go. See, a lot of people will sit in an ice bath and go, I've got a dream I'm on a sunny beach. Why? You're in cold water. Don't lie to yourself. So this thing that it's hard, it's only hard because you don't know what sits on the other side of it. Because what sits on the other, it's like going to the gym. I'm in a bit of pain at the moment because I've kicked into the gym. I've got DOMS like you wouldn't believe, delayed onset muscle soreness. Man, and I'm sitting there just going, I just lifted my arms up there and I was like, oh God, I feel that. But that's okay because I know what's going on with the physiology of that. I know I've torn my muscles a little bit, but I haven't over torn them. I'm not in the gym lifting the heaviest weights. I could lift twice the amount I'm lifting at the moment, but I'm not going to do that because I'm using wisdom and understanding of my body and connection with my body and going. So I go into the gym with that. I have a rough idea of an area I want to go, and I go, what am I going to do? And okay, I'm going to do this exercise, and I'm now doing these rotational exercises, and I'm starting to move better, and I'm finding this range of movement kicking in instead of these big bench presses and stuff like that. No, I'm nurturing myself back into it, but I'm moving and I'm taking accountability, and it's uncomfortable. Yep, shit happens. It's because you are born at this. You were born at the time on this earth, and you're this age because this is the size of the hammer that you need to crack the nut that you are.
That's powerful.
And that's the issue is that most of us, you look at people going through fucking terrible things. That's the size of the hammer they needed to crack the nut that they are. So the size of the hammer you have around you at this point in time to crack the nut that you are. Crack it open and get life out of it. And I think that's what we actually got to start to look at is that this is why it's so easy for kids is they don't need a big nut. Don't need a big hammer to crack the nut. They're already quite open, and especially up to the age of, 7. I remember when I was at 7 years of age that I was walking up the street, and I still remember this. It was it was a beautiful moment. And I had this epiphany. How do we know this isn't a dream and one day we'll wake up from it? And I remember exactly where I was, and I ran up to Dad, and Dad, Mensa level brain, and he had an answer for everything. And I said, "Hey, Dad, how do we know this isn't a dream and one day we'll wake up from it?" And the first time I heard my dad said, "I don't know. How do we know this isn't a dream?" I still remember that. And the thing is that the dream is the illusion that we're under because we're operating from an actor. Imagine you spend your whole life, you're an actor up on stage and you get hit on the head and you forget that this is only a stage you're playing on. Yeah. So the thing is you need another hit on the head. That's the size of the hammer you're living. So if you're in a disease state, a dis-ease state, a tumultuous state, a painful state at this point in time, you got the size of the hammer you need to crack yourself open. Have the courage to lean in. Don't pull away from it. Lean in with accountability. Love yourself. And one of the beautiful, most beautiful meditations, I am enough. I am enough.
Duncan, that was wildly hypnotic listening to you then. It was just like phenomenal.
I'm not indoctrinating.
Oh my goodness. You're just, yeah, your wisdom is so profound and so clean and aligned. It's beautiful. And it just, I really feel what you're saying, and there's so much depth there, you know. And what I love the most is that you are there and living it. You're not just saying it, you feel it and you embody it. And it's so beautiful to see. We need more strong, fierce leaders like you in our community out there being that light bearer and way shower, because it's,
I hear you.
yeah,
It's
amazing.
Come on, lads.
Yep.
Step up.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah,
It's just been amazing. Thank you.
No, I really appreciate it. And I appreciate, I'm yeah, what are we, an hour 20? I was saying a minute 20. Geez, that time gets but I think there's, yeah, it's so beautiful. And I love that you guys are, you know, the podcast I had was Nutritious Conversation. I'll probably rebirth that down the track because it is this nutritious conversation. It comes back to what I was saying, is that you are what you eat.
Exactly.
And what you eat is not just the food you put in your mouth. So, we know that you're more like the 5 people you hang around with. It's one of the studies that are done. We also know that if you feed on fear, you'll grow fear. You know, and we know that we've got to nourish ourselves in a completely different way, and we've got to wash our mind. You know, there's a beautiful saying, a biblical saying, you transform through the renewal of your mind. And to renew, if you look at the root word of the renew, means to wash, to make clean again.
I love that.
Know?
And I think even the language that we use, the words we say to ourselves, the things that we associate, you've highlighted that today without even saying it. You're just changing the dialogue and the language to make it more impactful. Vitality, as an example, when you're sharing that, I was just like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like every time we say mental health, it attaches it to a negative.
Yeah.
Like there's a history there and there's a word. And so rephrasing it, like it's just, yeah, so important how we nourish ourselves, our ears, our minds, our language.
Fear forced commercializing. When you see that sitting around something, you know that's not there. You have to use a lot of discernment. You don't need to fight anything. There's nothing to fight, you know, and you don't need to fear. You know, fear is getting you to pay attention to, you know, to what's going on with you. Yeah, there's beautiful modalities out there to actually nurture the nervous system back into health, you know, but things can happen in the twinkling of an eye. I mean, we've seen Anita Mujani is a prime example of that, who overcame incredible cancer. And I think within days, she had grapefruit size or lemon sized tumors in her body. And then she experienced who she was outside of the personality that was created for her. And she saw who she was and she changed. And that created a completely different paradigm shift in her body. You want to be a paradigm disruptor.
Yeah.
So a paradigm disruptor, not a paradigm rebel. Paradigm disruptor is actually you come from the knowing of who you are and your life will change. It has to. It's a spiritual principle.
Mate, I know that we could talk for a lot longer. And we haven't even discussed what you do with your current role. We haven't delved into the things that you have done. You've shared philosophy, you've shared your beliefs, you've shared so many wonderful things with us today. We haven't even scratched the surface. So I think we're definitely going to get you back for another conversation, like you said, with your son and his injury and the journey that you went on with that. Like there's so many things that we'd love to hear more about. So I just want to say a big thank you. It was lovely to meet you. You're full of energy. I really enjoyed today. Thank you.
Oh, good. I love it. And I really, you know, love Catherine a bit. So, you know, we've known each other for a little while and it's beautiful now to love you, Steph, mate. Big love. And I think, yeah, it's amazing to have these beautiful nutrient dense conversations. And, you know, let's create new standards. That's what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Creating new standards. We're not mediocre anymore. We're not fucking mediocre.
There's our infinite potential right there, Duncan.
Absolutely.
You nailed it. Love
So I don't
it.
know what I'm doing. In all honesty, I don't even know what I'm doing at the moment. What I'm wanting to create, what I'm wanting to do. I'm trying to play around with a website, do a workshop. I don't know. If anyone's got any ideas, let me know. But I am enough.
You are.
Hang on. Can I throw you under the bus for a second? Because Catherine and you met at a retreat, and Catherine goes and does a support role at this retreat, ongoing since, and I call her the official hugger. And my understanding is that you go to the retreats and you're an official hugger as well. You're there, you hold space for people. That's an important job, mate. You don't need a website or to do much else. Like if you're going to be an official hugger, then that's a good starting point. Use that as your title.
You're in, I think this is the thing is that you want to be in service after you've actually healed your wounds. Don't be in service until you've healed your wounds. You know, I tried to beat, I think we've done it a couple of times. We're there in a couple of weeks actually helping some mates out as well, and at this gorgeous retreat. And it's just I'm literally cutting water, carrying water and cutting wood, or cutting wood, carrying water. And it's just the humility of that actually to be there with that and to be able to hold that energetic space, with people. Again, these things are great. They create a bit of breathing space, but it's up to the person to actually keep going.
Yeah.
Big hugger. Love a hug, and I think we've lost that connection with each other.
Yeah.
And so, if you could sit there and actually entrain the person to the heart space that you're operating in, so their heart space actually vibrates and comes a little bit more alive. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Absolutely, mate. A bit more heart-to-heart connection physically and spiritually.
Oh, absolutely. And let's go back to our original face, the one we had before our parents were born.
Thank you.
Thank you, mate.
Big love, you groovers.